We're going to wait 2 more minutes or so and get started. All right. And while you're coming in, let's get the chat warmed up. So if you want to drop in the chat where you're zooming in from and what inspired you to join us today, that would be great. Oh, it's great to hear. All right. Thank you so much for chatting in the chat. All right, I think we can get started. So hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar that's on youth adult partnerships, strategies for presenting together. We are AHI, Adolescent Health Initiative at the University of Michigan. We're a multidisciplinary group focused on improving the quality of care for adolescents by making sure that it's youth-centered and driven. So this webinar will be facilitated by our TAC members, and we'll talk more about what TAC is soon. And so throughout the presentation, we'll ask you to reflect on your own experiences as an adolescent and how the adults you interacted with and partnered with supported your agency and learning experiences. So let's meet our presenters.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jaren. I'm a freshman at Wayne State University, and I've been a member of TAC for about a year now. So TAC is pretty much an advisory council that works with the Adolescent Health Initiative, and we're about 15 to 20 we're 15 to 20 of us, and we're aged between 15 to 22 years old. And we work on projects to help health centers and providers be more adolescent focused and really be cognizant of youth needs. So we worked on many different projects. Last year, I got to go to different health clinics and analyze how inclusive to youth they are. So it's been a really fun experience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zoya. I am a senior at Washtenaw International High School, and I've been a TAC member. This is going to be my 3rd year now. So I think another really great part of TAC is getting to be a part of the Conference of Adolescent Health that's put on every year by AHI in Detroit. And I know that I've had an experience working with adults in one presentation where we talked about sleep, and I got to end sleep and the effect on our health and adolescent health. So I know that I got to share my experiences being a student and share all about that, which was a really good experience for me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anusha. I am also a senior in high school. I use she, her pronouns. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. But so my fun fact is that I've lived in 3 different countries, and I'm also part of TAC. And this summer, I also had a remote internship for AHI, Adolescent Health Initiative, which was a really great experience for me to work on my own projects led by youth and supported by the adults at AHI. So that was a really great experience too. And we'll be talking about all the different levels of participation soon.
All right, then hi everyone, I'm Sheba. I'm a program intern for AHI this semester, and I'm a first-year master's student at the School of Public Health at University of Michigan. Yes, and then we also have Lauren Vasquez and Jenny Lane, who are staff from AHI, who are in the wings here to support us and answer any questions that you may have about AHI and some of the content we'll be presenting. All right.
So we're just going to quickly go over the agenda for today. We're first going to look at each of the phases of a youth-adult partnership for projects or presentations. And then we're going to go over some things that seem to work and some challenges. Then we'll share a guide of 3 different modules that you can complete independently or all together of the tips that we talk about, so you have a concrete resource. And then we'll share different ways that adults and youth can present information together. We'll finish off with a Q&A, and we want you to think about the strategies that have worked for you and what you hope to implement. We encourage you to pop any questions or comments into the chat at any time as well. So we're going to start off today with a scenario that include a number of common problems that arise when youth partner with adults. So a while ago, I was asked to help present a presentation on vaping, juuling, and electronic cigarettes by some researchers that reached out to TACTEC. To be honest, I was excited, so I volunteered right away, and I thought it would be a great experience. Maybe even something I could put on my resume. And plus, I'm around so many people in my high school, including some friends that actually use Juuls and vapes, so I thought I would have some real life examples and insights to bring to the presentation. Unfortunately, it didn't go as well as I would have hoped. It all started with the planning. We tried to meet beforehand. I gave them various times that I was free after school and even on the weekends. I'm a part of so many different activities, but nothing seemed to work out with my schedule. This made me a little more nervous. I'm someone that likes to prep, and I figured there would be time beforehand to think about what I wanted to say. On the day of, after finally finding someone that would drive me 45 minutes out to where the conference was being held, I arrived about 30 minutes before the presentation. I was greeted by the 2 researchers and another youth, all of whom I'd never met. They automatically started talking about their presentation and suggested things that we should say, all of which aligned with all their points they were trying to make. Even though I had some personal stories that didn't exactly match up with those points, they made it seem like this was not the place to tell those stories. As we entered the presentation room, I was really surprised. There were so many people in there, and they were all very, very well dressed. I definitely did not expect this, and it put me a little on edge. After the main presentation was over, there was time for the audience to ask us questions. The thing is, answer the question and ask if we had anything to add, or just answer it completely. I really wanted to use my personal experience. I honestly thought it was some good information, but at that point, I didn't feel comfortable doing that. Soon, the presentation was over. The researchers thanked us and left us to go talk to some people. And that was that. I can say that at least I got the experience, but honestly, I wasn't even paid for my time and I missed work to be there. I felt like a trophy on a shelf, and the whole time I was thinking, why was I even there? So although lots of mistakes were made, they were each based on real life events that have deterred youth from contributing in a meaningful way during youth-adult partnerships.
Yes, thank you. The pitfalls that we saw here, and maybe those pitfalls won't happen all at once necessarily in a presentation, but they do have to happen quite often. So we're going to look at them from different ways and how they could have been handled differently. So first, we noticed that the adult in the situation, it's difficult because youth have school during the day and adults have work during the day, but sometimes partnering with youth for a meaningful connection means meeting during the evening or meeting during the weekdays. So we can accommodate youth school, extracurriculars, sports, family responsibilities, things like that. And then we have logistical barriers. So we know that, sometimes we don't always have a budget to pay a stipend for our youth partners, but as adults receive compensation for their time, youth deserve compensation for theirs. So if you partner with youth through an established youth council, sometimes they'll be able to cover the cost of the stipend, but if your organization can't, if there is really no possible way for a stipend or some sort of compensation, you need to make sure that that is communicated to the youth and that everyone's on the same page about that. And so for coordination, there's a lot to coordinate, but we want to make sure that it's happening because it's worth the effort. if any of these points aren't addressed, the youth might not even show up, things might fall apart. So we want to make sure that there is transportation. In Jaren's scenario, 45-minute drive, they were lucky enough to find that person, but if, sometimes youth don't have a car, they don't have someone who can drive them, they have to use public transportation. So we want to make sure that transportation is accounted for. Everyone knows what time we're presenting, everyone knows where we're presenting, everyone knows the dress code and the expectations for the conference or whatever is happening. So we know it can be hard and challenging for adult professionals to include content that might be more academic and for youth to have time in that same presentation, but there's lots of ways to be creative about how we can present this information and keep it as brief as you can. So if you have the opportunity to partner with youth, you want to make sure you're maximizing that opportunity and building in the opportunity for youth to respond to participant questions and share their perspectives. And remember that they may not align with your point of view always, but their perspective and their experiences are still theirs.
Okay,
Maybe
so
you should then.
Sorry, Nisha. I think we can continue forward right now.
okay, so I know Anisha froze out a little bit, but that's okay. So we can read a couple of the other ones. But here we're going to do a quick poll about the most challenging pitfalls that you find the most challenging for you and the most hard to come across and work around. So we recognize that we definitely all have more ones that you find the most challenging for you. Some of these are definitely harder to control than others, but making sure to keep all of these in mind while planning can improve the experience when working with youth by a lot and will just help build that relationship. So we'll give a couple moments to choose the ones that you find the most difficult, and then we'll share out the results at the end. So I'm seeing a couple that are in the lead about schedules, compensation, and recruiting a diverse group of youth. Those seem to be the most popular. Oh, coordination is also catching up.
I don't believe we can show the results to the group, but
Okay. So 42% currently find it the most challenging to accommodate adolescent schedules to allow ample time. 49% recruiting a diverse group of youth. That seems to be in the lead.
figured it out, so yeah.
Okay, so as we can see, we have we have a little bit of just like a slight preference over the recruiting diverse group of youth, and definitely making sure to, I know it can be hard, but these are just things that we might have to consider in the future.
These are all things that we're here to help you with.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Okay. Anusha, are you still there? Just making sure you're not freezing out.
Yes. All right. So As I talked about earlier, the different levels of participation. So we'll go just kind of work through the ladder and I'll give you some examples. So the bottom three are what we consider non-participation. So manipulation is going to look like when adults use young people to support causes and then kind of turn around and pretend that the causes were inspired by young people. Decoration happens when young people are used to bolster a cause in a relatively indirect way. The adults may not pretend that the cause is inspired by young people, but it's still not an effective partnership. Tokenism is what happens when young people appear to be given a voice, but in fact have little or no choice about what they do or how they participate. I would say this is pretty similar to what we saw in the scenario that Jaren read. So then we kind of move on. Important to note that it's not always the aim to achieve the highest level. There's different projects, there's different things that need to happen at these different levels. And I'll be giving examples of each one. So, creating those really important youth initiated shared decisions with adults is going to be hard, but it's worth it in the end. But again, it's not always the goal. So starting at the bottom, we have assigned but informed. So this is what happens when young people are assigned a specific role and informed about how and why they're involved. So this can be embodied by like a youth or community youth board. Consulted and informed happens when young people give advice on projects or programs designed and run by adults. And so these young people are informed about how their input will be used and the outcomes of the decisions made by the adults. And so this can be seen through like youth advisory councils of independent organizations. Adult initiated and shared decisions with young people occurs when projects or programs are initiated by adults, but the decision making is shared with the young people. So this could be like some sort of participatory research study directed. So this is what happens when young people initiate and direct a project or program and adults are involved only in a supportive role. And so this rung of the ladder can be seen through like youth-led activism, where the youth in this scenario are always taking the lead. And then the highest degree of participation is young people. Projects or programs are initiated by young people and decision making is shared between young people and adults. So these projects empower young people while at the same time enabling them to, learn from the life experience and expertise of adults. So it's very much a mutually beneficial relationship. So this can be seen through youth adult partnerships, which is what we're going to learn more about today.
We also want to emphasize that we don't represent all youth voice, and these were actually taken from the modules that we'll talk about later. But this is just more perspective on what youth want from adults and want them to know. So one council member had said, make sure to check in on us and ask. Everyone said, I really appreciate it when an adult explains what to expect, but it's so important that they do it in a way that's not talking down to me.
All right, so here are some strategies for success. So in all of our trainings and resource development, we like to stay focused on strengths and what to do rather than what not to do. So we're going to share some of the best ways to set yourself up for success with youth adult partnerships. So the first one is to recruit a diverse group of youth. On having a diverse group, however, it is harder in practice. So we encourage that you make that extra effort and recruit a diverse group of youth. So a couple of points we do want to point out are that youth are experts in their own experiences, but they do not encapsulate their entire community, touching on what Jaren said before. And then also while you're recruiting, we do want you to think about the bigger questions on making sure that the presentation and your missions and visions are diverse, equitable, and very inclusive. So who is trying to get into the conversation but can't? And what conditions have we created that constantly center certain identities and maintain certain identities as the majority? Whose voices are being minimized in society to allow others to be comfortable? So we've talked about the challenges here, which are helpful to acknowledge, but it is important to get this part right.
So here we're going to talk about another way to set up for success in these partnerships, things that the youth you're presenting with may need to know. So things like timing, meeting, contact, how many participants to expect, meals, stipends, questions will be asked the audience. I know personally that when I was presenting with an adult at the conference, I found that knowing what questions that I was going to be asked by the audience and knowing what kind of people were going to be in the audience during that presentation really helped me in preparing, and just like made me feel less nervous the day of, because I kind of had an idea of what I would say, and knowing that it would fit the audience that was there, I found that it was super helpful. Another thing that TACTAC has done the years past when prepping for this conference in general is spending a large chunk of the meeting that we have planned before the conference as dedicating it to logistics, because it's really important. And like Anusha said before, things might fall apart if these logistics aren't addressed. So knowing what to wear, how we'll all get there, and carpool, all that information, it really helped out and really made for a smooth process overall. So it may be valuable to set time aside when having these planning meetings, specifically for logistics.
Now we're going to get into the preparation work. So getting to know each other is very important. When you form genuine relationships with youth, it really promotes authenticity. And I think that really shows in the presentation, and it'll make the whole process more smooth and fun for all parties. Dedicate time to connect before the session so everybody's on the same page, like Zoya talked about. Establish clear forms of communication. This is key. We've learned through this pandemic that, communication is key, whether that be through email or if you guys are meeting in person or over text. Plan with youth and not for them. You do have access with whatever group of youth that you find to diverse backgrounds, identities, and experiences. So you want to make sure to actively incorporate that and be really cognizant of the group of youth that they have and how capable they are in contributing in a meaningful way. Ask youth what they're most passionate about. You can really find great new ideas that could help the project and just, again, build a closer bond. Have a mutually beneficial timeline so it works for everybody, and then be a safety net and provide the support that your youth need, because you are a team in the end. I once had an experience where I was working with some adults and I felt like they didn't really put in any effort to get to know me. So the whole process kind of felt like cold and distant, and that it was only like business. Where it was a clear timeline and they really valued my input. There were clear forms of communication, and I felt more prepared and comfortable in that space.
Okay, so we've talked about planning and logistics. So what happens after the presentation? So it's really helpful for both the youth and the adults to have some sort of debrief where you ask for their reflections. So it's really, so, getting that feedback from youth, like, what did you think? Especially if you're just saying good job. So, just you can, the most important thing is like the youth is looking to be a valuable member, and if you liked the way they were able to, take charge of the youth panel and were able to manage the panel, then you can say, I really liked the way you did this, and I thought you and for your organization. It's really important that you're sharing that with the youth too, because it can be really nice for youth to hear that positive feedback. And a lot of times what we've noticed is when adults partner with youth, a lot of the positive feedback is about the youth themselves. So it's really important that you're sharing that with them. And then following up. So in order to maintain that relationship with the youth, it's really important to follow up, thank you. like sending them those evaluation results, and maintaining that trust and relationship with that adult so that hopefully you can partner in the future and build an even stronger relationship and have that kind of foundation set up already. So when we're talking about feedback, we want to make sure that we're not talking about certain things like, so, okay, I'll just share one of my experiences. So in the past, I have been doing a presentation, and afterwards the adult has come up to me and said, wow, like you did way better than I was expecting. Like I really didn't think that was going to go so well. So I'm sure you guys can hear why something like that can be a little weird or a little offensive. There you go. So, just making sure that you're not coming in with the expectation of, oh, I have to include youth in this presentation. I don't want to, but I have to. So it might not go as well as if it was just me, but I will, because youth are actually really valuable and they're actually going to add to your presentation, and you should know that before coming into that presentation. So that's just something to consider for your debrief.
Okay, so thinking about these presentations, there's a lot of different formats that come with any type of youth-adult partnership. Here are some that we've seen, but there are definitely a lot of others. There's a traditional panel, there's role play, youth-driven panels, TED Talks, conversations, cafes, stuff like that. If possible, plan with youth to decide your format, but because they might have an idea that you might not have considered, seeing as maybe us youth have seen things in school or in other clubs and extracurriculars that might be a good presentation format. Any of these formats, though, even a traditional panel, can be meaningful as long as the factors that we've been talking about have been addressed. A question is, what is the fishbowl? A fishbowl is like, if anyone has an explanation that they want to share, I don't think I can say it properly.
So basically a fishbowl is like if you were kind of sitting at a table and having a conversation, let's say there's like 4 or 5 youth sitting around at a table having a conversation, and they already have their questions in front of them, and they're just discussing them, and kind of everyone else is observing, but not really like participating, like a fishbowl when you're like looking at fish in a fishbowl. That makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Anusha. Besides that, I think one of the more memorable presentations that I've seen was a theater performance at the conference, just because of the creativity and the fact that it was super youth driven, and you could see that throughout the whole presentation. So yeah.
Sorry. So questions to consider when partnering with youth. So these are just things that you should be thinking about beforehand and during presenting with youth. And there's a lot of things to keep in mind. I know we keep throwing them at you, but hopefully it'll be helpful for you to kind of remember going forward. So one is, which youth will you work with? So we kind of talked about this earlier, recruiting a diverse group of youth. It can be easy to just partner with like your colleague's teenager, but you really want to make sure you're making a meaningful participation, or you're making a meaningful connection with someone who has direct experience with the topic you're working on, with someone maybe who is affected by the topic you're working on. Those are really important. Establishing rapport with youth is, not always easy, but it can come from making sure you're planning with them, making sure you're setting up those meetings to get to know each other, making sure the other youth you're partnering with getting to know different youth. And then how are you ensuring the youth represent the population that you're discussing? So like I said earlier, you want to make sure that you're not bringing in a youth who has no experience, isn't really affected by the topic you're discussing. It's really important that they kind of have that direct connection. And then, who is your audience and what is the tone and purpose for this presentation? So this is really, really important for you to kind of figure out for yourself, but also for you to let your youth partner know about. because oftentimes that can help ease nerves and give them an idea of what their expectations should be. These are all things to consider also when you're picking a presentation format.
Okay, so here we are going to get into our first module talking about youth adult co-facilitation. There are two more that will be presented after this. So these can all be used separately, but will all work together as well. So this first one is specifically for youth who are planning on facilitating or working with adults. And a lot of the content comes straight from other for youth. I know that I might have like a small video clip that's included in this. So this module I think is really great because it has specific structure and really helpful tips for facilitating these hard conversations with adults on things like compensation and time management. As much as we want to reduce all of that awkwardness, it can still be a little bit hard for youth to come out straight away and talk about compensation and time management. So this module definitely has a lot of nice tips and structures for conversations revolving around that. This module is also helpful for first-time presenters because it really goes deep into everything that you should be thinking about while planning and presenting, especially like youth should be thinking about. It has good reminders spread out about how important us youth are to these presentations and just knowing the youth's worth. And just as you can see in this small screenshot, it has recognizing and representing your expertise, which is just really important for youth to know. And even though this module is specifically for youth, it may not be a bad idea for adults to skim through and note some key points that they notice, as there's probably a couple perspectives that are being said that you might not have considered before. So I really like this module for that reason.
Quickly chiming in about the modules, we've developed these 3 modules with our TAC youth members and Anusha as well, who worked on this summer, that are focused on youth adult co-facilitation. I do see a question about how long they are. They can take up to, they're pretty self-guided, so they can take as much time as you need, but typically like 15 to 20 minutes. And we have one on youth by youth for youth, one for adult professionals, and then one on co-planning where youth and adults can work together and work through the module together. And then like Zoya was saying, they do not need to be done all together. They can be done as individual modules. But yeah, we'll be sharing, thank you, Anusha, we'll be sharing the link to all 3 of these for you.
So just as Zoya was talking about the module for youth, this one is for adult professionals. And it really has a strong emphasis on planning with youth and not for them. So starting the presentation and the preparation process with that mindset. In this image, you can see, this is from the module directly, that a power dynamic is there, and it's really important to understand that. And that you should respect your partner's expertise and autonomy. I really liked how it talked about finding a sweet spot for the number of youth that you use, and that really depends on the format, purpose, and content of your presentation, so that's really valuable. And it also talks about the relationship with youth even after your project. So, you know, mentoring the youth and nurturing that relationship. I had a fellow TAC member who participated in a co-facilitation at the Adolescent Health Conference last year. And after the presentation, she said that an adult professional had gone up to her and said that they really valued her insight and they wanted TAC's feedback on a questionnaire. So we actually spent time during a meeting and went through the questionnaire, gave our feedback. So it doesn't only have to be in those facilitation settings where you're directly working with youth. They also give great advice about before, during, after the process, and also when.
Yes, so while those 2 are meant to be kind of done individually, this one is for youth and adults to work on together over a Zoom meeting. That totally works too. So basically this presentation works through all of the different things that you're going to need to make sure that are accounted for before the presentation. And maybe you'll do the first part, which is the introduction. So getting to know each other, learning about each other. Maybe you'll do that in the first meeting. And then the second part you'll do in the second meeting, which is our background and logistics. So this is kind of, you're going through what to expect about the event. So the event itself, the audience, the attire, and the basic needs. Those are all things that are on there to help you think about. We also have compensation, transportation, virtual presentations, forms and paperwork, all those questions, all those things that you may forget about. Those are all things that we have on there to work on together and answer together. Then we have what you see on the screen here, which is our communication portion. So like, how does everyone prefer to communicate? Do we like email, text, talking on the phone, things like making sure that's all communicated and that everyone has each other's contact information. Then we go to the actual presentation and activity planning, which is if there isn't, kind of talking about the objectives of the presentation, is the description of the presentation already written, things like that. We give tips for how to write those objectives. There's some pre-planning questions to consider, again, like audience, time, co-facilitator contributions, things like that. And then if you have already decided a presentation format, that's totally fine. And if you haven't, then you can work with your youth to do that in this module as well. And then you would put it all together, maybe in a Google Doc, things like that, and start the actual planning of the presentation. And then we just want to, touch on avoiding those common pitfalls that we touched on earlier. Look through some quotes together to see things that have happened to real adult presenters and TACTEC members, and how to avoid those pitfalls. And the adult to say like, hey, I'm a little concerned about this, or I'm unsure about this, and for that to be addressed, because you've already kind of created that relationship, that foundation, and that trust. And then at the end, we have a little reflection to talk about how it went, what needs to be done next, next steps, things like that. So this is supposed to be a really hands-on, working together to plan an actual presentation.
All right. So finally, we've talked about a lot of information to this. It's a Jamboard. And then we do have a QR code as well. So if we can put, there we go. The link is in the chat. So we can hop over to the Jamboard. And there are a couple. And we can go through together. So the first one is on what pitfalls do you want to be the most mindful of? And I did put a little screenshot of the common pitfalls we addressed. And then at the top of the screen, there's this small box that shows we have one on what did you learn today that you plan to implement? And then the third question is what experiences from your own adolescence do you want to hold on to while working with young people? So kind of going back to the reflection questions in the beginning. And then for those of you who haven't used Jamboard, on the left side here, there is a sticky note button. And let me just make sure that you can all edit it. And that should be done now. Thank you. And so there's a sticky note button here where you can click and make a sticky note and then type in, and then it should pop up on the Jamboard. It sounds like we're having issues with the board. Oh, okay.
One thing I just realized is that I just had to reload. So if it was showing that you didn't have the option to reload, and for folks who haven't used Jamboard before, that, yeah, we could use a little handhold.
Once you are able to get in, on the left side of the screen, you'll see a couple options for things you can click on, like a pen, eraser, the cursor button. We want sticky note. So a sticky note like this will pop up, and then you can type in whatever, whatever text you want to type, and then you should be able to place your sticky note somewhere on the board. And then it sounds like, okay, we're getting some people on the board and able to post. And then there's more questions hiding at the top of the screen. You'll see a small box that says 1 out of 3. Thank you. And then there's 2 other questions there that we can look over together. And then, perfect. So I'm going to kind of organize this according to our common pitfall sheet, just to kind of see where people are. And then if you have answered the questions, if you could please hop off, and then we can maybe try to get more people into the Jamboard. Thank you. Right. And then, oh, this is so beautiful. I love the ladder. All right. All right. I think if you're still having issues with the Jamboard and getting on, it might just try refreshing, and we can, and if you are done with the Jamboard, if you could hop off, and then we can, maybe that's, it just is not allowing that many people to hop on. Thank you. All right, I'm going to start recapping a little bit of the Jamboard. So it looks like some of the pitfalls that we want to be the most mindful of are recruiting a diverse group of youth and making sure that, and it ties in with logistics. So making sure that they have ways to get to the events, and then accommodating their schedules. It seems like there are some logistic barriers that we want to be mindful of. And then, yeah, I think the main one I'm seeing is recruiting a diverse group of youth is the main thing that we want to be the most mindful of. And then going forward with, what did you learn today that you plan on implementing? Language to be mindful of, new terms. The latter was a helpful analogy. And then I do want to mention that we will be sharing the recording with you after the webinar is over. And then if you would like, we can also share the slides with you. Let's see. It seems like the latter was a nice visual representation. Asking youth about their passions and being intentional about pre-planning and clarifying expectations to honor equitable contributions. I think those are all great points. Yes. All right, so different formats, the ladder, thinking about the ladder. And then what experiences from your own adolescence do you want to hold on to while working with young people? Trust, that is definitely a very, goes along with building rapport. And then, yeah, I do like this one, remembering adults who generally cared about my opinion and checked in with me. So pulling that forward and trying to work that into our interactions with youth. Yeah. Respect and honesty. I think those are also very important points. Yes. And then I think it is also important to acknowledge like negative experiences and what we don't want, like condescending language and stereotyping that we don't want to bring into our experiences and interactions with youth. Also really like this, knowing that it's okay to make mistakes. Very good point as well. Yeah, I really like all of these points. Thank you so much for participating. We're gonna hop back to the PowerPoint and then we can dive into our Q&A session. So we do have some questions that people put into the chat throughout. So you can go over those. And if you want to continue to add your questions to the chat, that would be great. And we can go through, have our youth expand upon those and talk a little bit more about their experiences. And then while you are doing that, we also do have a feedback survey for today. And then we'll also put the link to that in the chat as well. So if you could, we would love it if you could give your input on what you thought of the webinar and provided your feedback. That would be great. Thank you so much. So we can maybe dive into the Q&A.
The feedback survey is really quick and easy, and we'd really, really appreciate it if you did it. Thank you.
We had a couple questions from earlier in the chat that I wrote down, so I can read some of those off, and if anyone else has any, you can put them in the chat and we will get to those too. So the first question that was asked was, when thinking about logistics, are there other items to consider now that we are in a virtual environment?
I can answer that one. So definitely, the stuff like Zoom links, figuring out how you want to, like Google Docs, whatever works best for you guys, things like that is really important. Also, things like does the person you're working with have reliable access to Wi-Fi at their home? That's really important. Maybe you also want to make sure that you're considering like all safety considerations for the youth you're working with. Maybe they don't feel comfortable turning on their camera, and that's fine because they don't feel comfortable sharing the space that they are in, which is totally fine. They just want to participate by unmuting themselves or in the chat. All those considerations that we really haven't had to think about before are really, really important to make sure you're building that trust with the youth that you're working with. And a lot of the same stuff kind of applies, like even attire over over Zoom can be sometimes uncomfortable. So you want to make sure you're sharing that sort of information as well, and how many people are going to be there, things like that. Yeah, of course.
Nisha?
Another question was, do you have any resources using theater on Zoom?
Just to expand on the question, like certain other applications or ways to do theater on Zoom, just to clarify.
And I'm going to chime in real quick here too, and say hi. My name is Jenny Lane. I work at the Adolescent Health Initiative, and as Sheba mentioned, Lauren and I are here, have been in the wings, and just enjoying and supporting the work that TACTAC has done here on this. as TACTEC is not a theater group, we haven't been practicing specific strategies, but I also recognized a number of names of participants on this webinar who might have ideas. So I want to put it back out to folks here, because I know some of you do work more actively with young people in sort of using theater as an educational tool. So if anyone has strategies, we'd love to hear it, because I know that that has been a challenge. Particularly for theater, like I know in our local community, we've just had The Tempest, Shakespeare's The Tempest on Zoom. Did you all, those of you, or Jaren, are you smiling a little bit? Are you familiar with it? How they just did that at community high school? They did a whole performance of on Zoom. So far not seeing any strategies coming in through the chat. Yes, I think we were in agreement. It's probably a challenge. Lauren, I'm guessing maybe, I don't know if you saw this question about, can you share about what you might consider fair compensation? Which is a great question and one that comes up so often with working with youth councils, always trying to figure out what is fair to offer for youth speaking and planning events. Youth who are on this call, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So in regards to compensation, I've gotten many different types. Like I was in this health clinic stock photo shoot and they gave me like a $50 Visa gift card, which was great. I've had it where it's been hourly, like $15 an hour. But I think that anything like 10 and above would be great. If you want to do a kind of hourly thing, if you want to do compensation for a project. What I think is important is really getting your youth's input on what is good compensation for them, because it differs by group, and I think by state, especially like what minimum wage is considered in your state. I remember like the first time that I got compensated, I was kind of shocked because I was on a city youth council and never got compensated. And we put hours and hours into working with city council members, which is interesting because you would think that'd be a good use of tax money. But I always find like any sort of compensation just a great token of appreciation, and that like my time and my input was really valuable.
Communicated from the get-go about the situation and be like, hey, is this okay for you? And if it's not, I completely understand that, and we can either find another way or something else. Just making sure that there aren't any surprises and that everyone is on the same page from the beginning.
I'm just going to tie that in real quick as a strategy too for coordination and for trying to make sure you have diverse representation, because if people know upfront what the compensation will be, then they can really fairly assess whether they can afford to participate, whether they can participate instead of doing another job. But every grant we look at ways that we can meaningfully engage youth and also see if there are ways that we can work compensation in. And I know that not every organization has the capacity to have grant writers and have people looking for grants. So that can be a really big challenge. And we just want to acknowledge that it can be a challenge because we frequently hear that from our partners that there's just not a budget for it. And so really thinking then, are there other ways to make sure that you're acknowledging a young person's contributions, whether it's through providing coaching or support to them in other ways, and helping them think about the benefits to them. And then again, as our young people share, It's so great that somebody shared this resource here, and I want to mention too in the I know that Anusha earlier on shared the link to the 3 new modules that are on the AHI website that you can access for free anytime. And there are a list of resources at the end of those. So there are resources. This one I feel like we should add to it about youth participatory evaluation and strategies for engaging young people, because I don't think that that's on there. So we'll add that. Thank you for the good resources. Thanks for putting the link up top or at the bottom here again, Anusha. If anyone has other resources, please suggest them and we will include them in those.
Thanks, Jenny. There's another question that's back up. I want to try to get to some of those ones from earlier. What helps youth feel engaged via Zoom, looking for a way to break the Zoom fatigue and still connect?
I think for me personally, a lot of the times it's kind of hard to break the Zoom fatigue, but I know that having kind of like more efficient, shorter meetings instead of like maybe like trying to drag out longer meetings is can be like helpful. But in other times, I also know that longer meetings can help accommodate for people who have time issues and stuff like that. But for Zoom fatigue specifically, I know that using different activities, like things like the Jamboard that we just used, I know that I find that really helpful in that I don't have to unmute sometimes, or like I don't have to do too much. I can just like share my opinion with a Jamboard or a Padlet. There's a lot of, or like a poll even on Zoom. I think those are some things that can help me feel more engaged in things like that.
Yeah, and if you're having like a large group meeting with like your whole organization and you need there for like maybe an hour to like actually talk about their part, then, you know, be like, hey, we would love to have you for the whole meeting, but if you need to hop off, like we completely understand. Just like Zoya said, reducing that time on Zoom.
Yeah, I also want to add that if it is a longer meeting, because for Tech sometimes we have like 2 or 3 hour meetings, it's really important to have a break in there so everybody can turn off their camera, go relax, you know, do what they need to do. Or I've seen Zoom calls where they put on like a funny video during the break, so you can either sit there and watch it or go do something else for 10-15 minutes.
Great. There is another question, and I know we're just about short on time, but there's another question that I think would be really important. How can adults dismantle the stereotypes about youth that may be negatively influencing the adult-youth relationship? Stereotypes such as being entitled, immature, impatient, etc.
Setting group norms or kind of establishing what type of project it's going to be and how you guys are going to do it together could really help the youth feel like, you know, it's a safe space and that they feel comfortable working with you and any other adult professionals that you have on your team.
Yeah. And like those stereotypes we're always going to hold those, you know, they're implicit stereotypes. Youth have stereotypes about adults and adults have stereotypes about youth. It's just kind of the fact of life. But, you know, just getting started working with the youth is really going to help you dismantle those stereotypes. And kind of just the biggest thing is to acknowledge, I think you're already there, acknowledging that you have them, and seeing where they come into play. Like if, for instance, something happens where you feel like the youth is being immature, that can happen, but we want to make sure we're not applying that to all youth, and we're acknowledging that this is the reality for this one person, and that's fine. You know, everyone is different, but we want to make sure that, yes, that's a really great point. We're giving youth the room to be themselves and meeting them where they are. And oftentimes, if you're looking to form meaningful partnerships about the topics you're working on, you might, you know, end up partnering with a youth who is a little bit more reserved, or, you know, might have different circumstances than you expected. And so really meeting them where they are is super important. And there's a lot of tips for that in our modules as well.
I did want to point out that if you do have any projects or ideas that you do want youth voice on, you can definitely reach Lauren or Val, who lead TAC and work with our TAC members, so we can get you connected and have some collaboration with those projects.
Also, I'm wondering if we didn't get to some of the questions, if we can like write them up and put them in the email to send out afterwards. Okay, cool.
Yeah, the follow-up email is coming soon and it'll have the slides. Just to reiterate, since I know people have asked a number of times about slides, slides are coming, recording is coming, and then any added thoughts that we have that we didn't get to cover here. We'll also have the link to the modules in that too.
Well, thank you for your time today, and thank you for connecting with us. And other than that, have a wonderful day. We'll definitely send that follow-up email soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.